The golden lights of Beverly Hills stretched endlessly, glittering like stars that had fallen upon the earth. From the balcony of the Marasigan mansion, one could see the whole city breathing beneath the night sky. It was where power was whispered, where family names carried weight, heavier than steel. Inside the grand dining hall, crystal chandeliers glowed above a table lined with silverware and crystal glasses. It was a night meant to celebrate unity. At least that was the illusion carefully painted. Elegant, in her satin gown, Gloria Marasigan stood near the head of the table. Beside her, Theodore, her husband, sat upright, his face as stern as it was weary. They were pillars of wealth, founders of one of California's largest agricultural and real estate empires. And tonight, their youngest daughter, Amy, had returned home. When Amy stepped into the room, silence followed. Her ebony skin glowed under the light, her frame tall and graceful, shaped by years of modeling in New York. The simple white dress she wore was not the couture of the runway, but carried a quiet elegance, as though she wanted to remind everyone that she could command attention without extravagance. "Welcome home, my darling Gloria," said warmly, kissing her daughter's cheek. Amy smiled, her eyes softening at the comfort of her mother's voice. "It feels good to be back, Mama." But her gaze faltered when she turned toward the rest of the table. 4 pairs of eyes met hers, sharp, unwelcoming, painted with resentment. Raymond, the eldest brother, sat rigid, his jaw clenched as though her presence was insulting. Grace, always calculated, let out a scoff, the corner of her lips twitching with disdain. Tamara swirled her wine glass lazily, pretending indifference, but unable to mask the glint of hostility in her eyes. And Gladys, fiery and unrestrained, crossed her arms, glaring like Amy were a trespasser in her home. The tension was a storm waiting to break. Gloria, determined to keep the night civil, gestured for everyone to sit. Servants glided in, placing plates of prime rib and asparagus, pouring red wine into crystal goblets. The clinking of cutlery began, though the silence between the siblings weighed heavier than the food itself. Finally, Theodore cleared his throat. "We are grateful that you've come back, Amy. Your mother and I. We've decided it's time to prepare for the future. It is only right that we tell everyone tonight." Amy froze her fork halfway to her mouth. She had not expected her father to announce anything so soon. Raymond leaned back in his chair, his voice low but sharp. "Let me guess. This is about the inheritance." The table stiffened. Gloria placed her hand over Amy's. "Your father and I have entrusted the company, the estate, and all its holdings to Amy. She has proven herself responsible, focused, and capable of carrying the Marasigan name into the next generation." The words struck like thunder. Amy's eyes widened. "Mama! Papa!" She had always known they favored her, but to hear it confirmed in such absolute terms left her breathless. Raymond slammed his fist onto the table, rattling the glasses. "Are you out of your minds? I am the eldest. It is my right. You can't hand over everything to the youngest, simply because she plays dress-up in front of cameras." "Don't," Amy whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't reduce me to that, Raymond." Grace chuckled bitterly. "He's right, though. What do you know of business, of leadership? You've been paraded around in magazines while we've been here managing what you could never understand." Managing, Amy shot back, her calm cracking for the first time. "You mean wasting, gambling, throwing away opportunities until Mama and Papa had to clean up your messes." Tamara's lips curved into a cold smile. "And what are you going to do, little sister? Save us all. You may wear the crown now, but you'll never have the strength to keep it." Gloria's voice cut through, sharp as steel. "Enough. We are not here to tear each other apart. We are here to celebrate Amy's return." But the celebration had already curdled into bitterness. Amy lowered her gaze, forcing herself to swallow the lump in her throat. She had long known her siblings resented her, but tonight Their resentment had found its voice, and it was only a matter of time before it found its claws. After dinner, Amy retreated to the garden needing air. The fountains glistened under moonlight, roses blooming around her like whispers of forgotten innocence. She breathed deeply, yet unease coiled in her chest. Behind her, footsteps echoed. She turned, finding Tamara leaning against the marble column, a sly smirk on her lips. "Congratulations, sister. You've finally become the favorite, not just in name, but in power." Amy folded her arms. "You don't scare me, Tamara. You should." Tamara stepped closer, her perfume sickly sweet in the air. "Because crowns attract enemies, and in this house you are surrounded by them." Before Amy could reply, Tamara walked away, her laughter trailing like smoke. Amy's heart raced. She told herself it was just words, empty threats from a jealous sister. Yet something in Tamara's tone lingered heavy with promise. Later that night, Amy sat at her vanity removing her earrings. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Meet me tomorrow night at the warehouse on Sunset Boulevard. I have information about your siblings. Don't tell anyone." Her pulse quickened. Information about her siblings. Who could it be? And why contact her in secret? She hesitated, her mind torn between suspicion and curiosity. It could be a trap, but it could also be the key to understanding the venom growing inside her family for years. Amy stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her mother had chosen her. Her father had placed the weight of a dynasty on her shoulders. If her siblings were plotting against her, she needed to know. Slowly she typed her reply, "I'll be there." The next evening, the streets of Los Angeles pulsed with neon lights and restless energy. Amy's car glided through the city, her hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than she realized. Every shadow seemed sharper, every corner heavier with possibility. When she pulled into the warehouse, the lot was empty, save for a single black SUV parked under a flickering street lamp. Her chest tightened. Stepping out, she adjusted her leather jacket, her heels echoing against the concrete. "Hello?" She called, her voice steady, though her heart thundered. From the shadows, a figure emerged. "Hello, Amy." Her blood ran cold. It was Zeus, the same man she had seen on magazine covers, often with Grace clinging to his arm. He was charming in photographs, his smile polished and magnetic. But in person, his presence felt dangerous in this dimly lit warehouse. "You came," he said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Good. That makes things easier." Amy took a cautious step back. "You said you had information." "Oh, I do." He closed the distance slowly, his voice low. "The information is you." Confusion furrowed her brow, but two men stepped out from behind the SUV before she could question further. Their broad shoulders and heavy boots made the ground quake beneath them. Fear shot through her veins. Amy realized too late, this wasn't about giving her answers. This was about silencing her. She ran. Her heels clattered against the pavement as shouts echoed behind her. Hands reached for her, but adrenaline surged and she slipped free, sprinting toward the street. "Don't let her get away," Zeus barked. A shot rang out. Pain seared through her arm as a bullet grazed her skin. She stumbled, nearly falling, but forced herself forward, her breath ragged. The city lights blurred as tears welled in her eyes. She didn't look back. She couldn't. All she knew was that if she stopped and let fear swallow her, she would never rise again. Somewhere in the chaos of her escape, one thought anchored her. Her siblings weren't just jealous. They wanted her gone, and they would kill to make it happen. The Pacific coast was merciless that night. Waves slammed against the jagged rocks, their roar echoing like thunder beneath the stars. The moon, silver and cold, watched as Amy staggered along the shoreline, blood dripping from her wounded arm, staining her white blouse crimson. Every breath was a battle, every step a plea. Her heels were long gone, abandoned in her frantic flight. The pavement had shredded her soles, and now the sand clung to her feet, mixing with blood and salt. Her mind screamed for her to stop, but instinct pressed her forward. Somewhere behind her, she still heard the faint hum of an engine, the men who hunted her, unwilling to surrender. Her thoughts scattered like the tide. Mama, Papa, they believe I'm safe. They don't know. And my siblings, God, they want me erased. Her chest tightened, but she forced her trembling legs to move. She could not die here, not when she had been chosen to protect everything her parents built. Suddenly her knees buckled. She stumbled onto the wet sand, her body curling into itself, shivering. Salt water licked her wounds as the tide crept closer. For a fleeting moment, the temptation of surrender whispered sweetly, "Rest, Amy. Sleep. Let the sea carry you away." But then voices, not the harsh foreign shouts of her pursuers, but something softer. A child's laughter carried on the wind, a dog barking in the distance, the warm crackle of firewood. Amy tried to lift her head. Farther along the shore, faint lantern light glowed from a rustic cabin nestled against the cliffside. Its windows flickered, promising warmth she thought she'd never feel again. She crawled. Every scrape of her hand in the sand was agony, every inch stolen from death itself. She barely noticed when the world tilted, the stars spinning above her. Her last sight before darkness claimed her was the silhouette of a man, broad-shouldered, tall, framed against the cabin's light. And then nothing. She woke to warmth. The scent of cedarwood filled her nose, mingling with something sharper, iodine perhaps. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy as stone, but light eventually pierced through. The ceiling was rustic and wooden, with beams that stretched overhead like arms. She shifted slightly, realizing she lay on a couch covered with thick woolen blankets. A fire crackled nearby, painting the room in amber hues. Easy. The voice was low, steady, commanding, yet gentle. Amy turned her head, wincing, as pain flared in her arm. Beside her was a man with piercing blue eyes and sandy hair, shadowed by the firelight. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms dusted with seawater and grit. He pressed a cloth to her wound. "The bullet only grazed you. You'll live, but you need rest." Amy's throat burned. Her voice came out hoarse. Who are you?" He studied her quietly, deciding how much of himself to reveal. Finally, he said, "Daniel. Daniel Walker." The name meant nothing to her in that moment. Just a stranger. A man who had found her half dead on the shore. She tried to sit up, but the dizziness struck, forcing her back down. "I need to go. They'll find me. I can't stay here." Daniel's hand shot out, firm, but not unkind, pressing her shoulder gently against the cushions. "You're not going anywhere tonight. You'll collapse before you take 10 steps. The firmness in his tone disarmed her. For the first time since the nightmare began, someone was speaking to her, not as prey, not as an enemy, but as a person who mattered. Amy's lips trembled. "You don't understand. They want me dead." His gaze didn't waver. "Then they'll have to get through me first." Her heart lurched unexpectedly at his words. She wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Why would a stranger risk himself for her? And yet the steadiness in his eyes told her he wasn't bluffing. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the fire's hiss. Daniel busied himself in the small kitchen, preparing a pot of tea. He moved with the practiced ease of someone used to solitude, each motion deliberate. Amy watched him quietly, her body weak, but her mind racing. Who is he? Why does he live out here away from the city? And why do I feel safer in his presence than in years? When he returned with a steaming cup, he knelt beside her. "Drink. It'll help." She hesitated, then sipped. The warmth slid down her throat, soothing grounding. "Thank you," she whispered, surprised by her own sincerity. His lips twitched almost a smile, but not quite. "You don't need to thank me. Just tell me who's after you." Amy froze. The question pressed against her chest like a blade. Should she tell him? He was a stranger. If she revealed too much, he could hand her over. But his presence, his steadiness, made her want to trust him. She looked into the fire, her voice quiet. "People I should be able to trust. People who share my blood." Daniel said nothing, but his jaw tightened as though he understood betrayal too well. As the night deepened, exhaustion pulled at Amy's bones. She drifted between wakefulness and dreams haunted by flashes of Zeus's grin, the glint of her siblings' cold eyes. At one point she was startled awake and breathless, sure someone was standing at the window. But Daniel was already there, drawing the curtain shut, murmuring, "You're safe." The words, simple as they were, sank into her like a balm. By morning the storm had passed. Sunlight filtered through the window, painting the cabin golden. Outside, seagulls cried as waves lapped gently against the shore. Amy sat up slowly, the blanket slipping from her shoulders. For a moment, she almost forgot the chaos of the night before. Almost. Daniel entered carrying a tray of eggs and toast. His expression softened when he saw her awake. "Good. You're stronger today." Amy blinked at him, struggling to reconcile the rugged fisherman before her with the strange calm he exuded. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. He set the tray down, meeting her gaze directly. "Because you needed saving." It was such a simple answer, yet it unraveled something inside her. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not her siblings, not the shallow men who courted her because of her family name. For the first time, Amy wondered if fate had dragged her into this man's orbit for a reason. Later that afternoon, Daniel led her outside. The cabin sat on a bluff overlooking the endless sea. Wooden boats bobbed below at the dock, and the salty air clung to her skin. Amy inhaled deeply, letting the ocean fill her lungs. "It's beautiful here." Daniel glanced at her, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "It's honest. That's what I like about it." She turned to him, studying the quiet strength in his profile. A man of few words, yet each one carried weight. She wondered what secrets lay beneath that calm surface. But before she could ask, Daniel's expression darkened. His eyes flicked toward the road that wound down the cliff. A black SUV was parked far away, its tinted windows glinting under the sun. Amy's stomach dropped. Daniel's voice was firm, steady. "Stay inside. Lock the door." Her pulse quickened. "It's them." He didn't answer, but the way he positioned himself between her and the SUV told her enough. In that moment, as fear clawed back into her chest, Amy realized one thing with startling clarity. She was no longer running alone. The black SUV lingered at the curve of the road for hours. From the cabin porch, Amy watched it through narrowed eyes, her pulse a steady drumbeat in her ears. The tinted windows revealed nothing, just her reflection staring back, pale and weary. Daniel stood a few feet ahead of her, his body taut, shoulders squared. In the daylight he looked even more formidable, no longer just the fisherman who had carried her to safety, but something sharper, more deliberate. Finally, with a low engine growl, the SUV pulled away its tires, grinding gravel as it disappeared down the road. Amy let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "They found me," she whispered, her voice thin against the ocean's roar. Daniel turned his gaze steady, and they left. Whoever they are, they didn't want a confrontation. Not here. Not yet. Not yet. The words chilled her. Amy wrapped her arms around herself, the breeze tugging at her hair. "It's only a matter of time. They'll come back." Maybe Daniel admitted, his voice calm. But not while I'm here. She looked at him then, at the quiet authority in his stance and the conviction in his eyes. He wasn't boasting. He was stating a fact. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she believed him. Inside the cabin, the air grew thick with silence. Amy sat near the fire, tracing her fingers along the rim of her teacup. Her thoughts whirled the inheritance, her siblings' venom, the night Zeus had lured her into the trap. Daniel poured himself coffee, leaning against the counter. "You need to tell me everything," he said. "Finally. Why are they after you? Why would someone risk killing you?" Amy hesitated. The words clawed at her throat, but fear, old and familiar, kept her quiet. She had never spoken of it aloud. Not to her mother, not to her father. To admit it would mean acknowledging the truth that her own blood had turned against her. Her fingers tightened around the cup. "It's my family," she said at last, her voice barely audible. Daniel's gaze sharpened, but he didn't interrupt. "They hate me," she continued, each word laced with the weight of years. "Because everything, the company, the land, the fortune, was given to me. Not them. Raymond, Grace, Tamara, and Gladys see me as a thief, as if I stole what was rightfully theirs." Her throat closed, and she forced a shaky breath. "And Zeus, he's Grace's lover. He tried to kill me. I don't know if he acted alone or if they all wanted me gone. But I can't pretend anymore. They want me erased." The confession trembled in the air between them. Daniel's jaw tightened, his knuckles whitening around the mug. For a moment, he looked as though he might shatter it. But when he spoke, his voice was controlled. "So your own family is willing to kill you for power?" Amy flinched at the bluntness of his words but nodded. Daniel set the mug aside and knelt before her, his blue eyes fierce. "Then, listen to me, Amy. You're not alone. Not anymore." Her breath caught. The sincerity in his voice cut through the fog of fear anchoring her. She hadn't realized how desperately she needed to hear those words until now. Days passed, and Amy remained in the cabin by the sea. The wound on her arm healed slowly under Daniel's careful bandages. He rarely spoke of himself, but his actions spoke louder than words. How he cooked for her, left books on the nightstand, or lingered by the window at night, as though keeping watch. One evening, Amy stood on the dock, the sunset painting the waves in hues of crimson and gold. She let the wind whip through her curls, closing her eyes, trying to forget the venom of her siblings' voices. "You don't belong here," Daniel's voice said behind her, though there was no malice in it. She opened her eyes, startled. "What do you mean?" He leaned against a post, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "This isn't your world, hiding in cabins running from shadows. You belong where you can stand tall, where people can see you for who you are." Amy's chest tightened. "And who is that Daniel A. pawn in my family's game? A target?" He stepped closer, his presence warm despite the chill in the air. "A survivor. A woman stronger than anyone gives her credit for." Her breath hitched. The way he said it, steady, without hesitation, made her believe it, if only for a moment. Later that night, curiosity gnawed at her. Daniel had never explained how he came to live alone by the sea. He spoke like a man who had seen the world, yet here he was, gutting fish and fixing boats. When he left the cabin briefly, Amy wandered into the small study at the back of the house. Shelves lined the walls, filled not with fishing manuals, but thick volumes of law, finance, and international trade. On the desk, neatly stacked, were documents bearing the crest of Walker International Hotels. Her breath stilled. Walker International. She had read about it countless times in Forbes, one of the largest luxury hotel chains in the United States, headquartered in New York. And then it clicked. Daniel Walker. She pressed a hand to her lips, her heart hammering. The rugged fisherman who had stitched her wounds, who cooked her eggs and toast, was no ordinary man. He was heir to a dynasty nearly as powerful as her family's empire. The revelation left her reeling. Why would someone like him hide here away from his world? And why hadn't he told her? When Daniel returned, she was still standing by the desk, the papers trembling in her hand. His eyes darkened instantly. "You shouldn't be in here." Amy swallowed hard. "You lied to me." Daniel's jaw flexed. For a moment, silence stretched thick with tension. Then he exhaled slowly, his shoulders softening. "I didn't lie. I didn't tell you." "Why?" Her voice broke. Why pretend to be someone else? He met her gaze, something raw flickering in his eyes. "Because I wanted to be seen as a man. Not as a name, not as a fortune. Just a man." Amy's heart twisted. She understood far too well. For years, she had been defined by the Marasigan name, by wealth and legacy, and rarely had anyone looked at her and seen simply Amy. The silence stretched, but it was different now, charged, intimate. Slowly, Daniel stepped closer, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Now you know who I am. The question is, does it change what you see?" Her breath trembled as her eyes locked with his. "It changes everything," she whispered. And yet, in the quiet of her heart, she knew it also changed nothing. That night, as Amy lay awake in the small bedroom Daniel had given her, she repeated his words in her mind. Secrets upon secrets. Her family wanted her dead. Daniel was not who he seemed. And yet she didn't feel lost for the first time since the nightmare began. Because somehow, against all reason, she trusted him. Far away in the glittering towers of Los Angeles, Raymond Marasigan swirled a glass of scotch, his eyes fixed on the city below. "She's alive," he muttered, tossing a newspaper across the desk. A blurry photograph showed a woman on the Seattle docks, her face half hidden, but unmistakably Amy. Grace's manicured fingers traced the edge of the paper, her lips curving into a sly smile. Then Zeus failed. Raymond's eyes hardened. "Then we finish what he couldn't." The siblings exchanged a glance, silent understanding passing between them. If Amy thought she had escaped, she was wrong. The hunt was only beginning. The headline spread across every Los Angeles newspaper the following morning. Heiress Amy Marasigan dies in tragic car explosion. Grainy photographs showed a blackened wreckage on the outskirts of San Diego, its metal frame twisted beyond recognition. Reporters wrote of brake failures, fire, and a body so unidentifiable it could only be confirmed through personal effects. Inside the Marasigan estate in Beverly Hills, Gloria's anguished cry echoed through the marble halls. "My daughter, my baby girl." She collapsed against Theodore's chest, her sobs tearing through him like knives. The patriarch, usually stoic and unyielding, trembled as he held her. His eyes glistened, though no tears fell. He had seen too much, lost too much to weep. Yet the hollow in his chest deepened with every heartbeat. Around them, servants lowered their heads in silence, though whispers carried in the corners. Some swore they had seen Amy only days before, radiant and alive. Others muttered of enemies' conspiracies and the dangers of wealth. But for her siblings, grief was nothing more than performance. Raymond stood near the fireplace, his arm around his wife, though his expression remained composed. Grace dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, sighing theatrically. Tamara pressed her lips together as though holding back tears. Gladys stared at the floor, her jaw tight, her nails biting into her palms. Yet beneath the surface of their practiced sorrow, a different truth pulsed, a truth only they shared. Amy was gone, and now nothing stood in their way. Far from the city's glitz, the sea breeze carried different whispers. Amy stood on Daniel's porch, the morning light painting her face in gentle gold. She held a newspaper Daniel had brought back from the docks. Her name blazed across the front page above the story of her supposed death. Her hands shook as she clutched the paper. "They've buried me," she whispered. "I'm alive, and they've already buried me." Daniel's expression darkened as he read over her shoulder. "This isn't an accident report. It's a cover-up. Someone staged this." Amy's heart clenched. She imagined her mother's tears, her father's silence. She pictured mourners gathering at the mansion believing she was ashes and smoke. A sob rose in her throat, but she swallowed it down. She couldn't afford to break. "Not yet. They'll think I'm gone forever," she murmured, staring at the waves. "Maybe that's what they want to erase me, so they can take everything." Daniel turned her gently to face him. His hand brushed against her arm, grounding her. "Then let them think you're gone. It gives you time. Time to heal. Time to plan." Her eyes flickered up to his, searching. "And what if I never come back? What if it's easier to disappear?" The question hung heavy in the air, but Daniel didn't flinch. You could run. Please leave all of it behind. Live quietly, far from the poison of Los Angeles." "But," his voice softened, "that's not who you are, Amy. You don't run. Not from them. Not from yourself." Something in his tone unwavering, certain broke the last of her defenses. Her vision blurred as tears slipped down her cheeks. Daniel caught them with his thumb, his touch gentle but steady. "You don't have to fight this war alone." Amy let herself lean into him for the first time since the nightmare began. His warmth was solid, his heartbeat steady against her cheek, and in that fragile silence, something unspoken blossomed, something more dangerous than her siblings' hatred, more intoxicating than any inheritance. It was the beginning of love. In Los Angeles, the funeral unfolded with grandeur befitting the Marasigan name. Rows of black-clad mourners filled the private cemetery in Hollywood Hills. Journalists, socialites, business partners, all gathered to bid farewell to the daughter who had once been the empire's golden light. The casket gleamed under the California sun, draped with white lilies. A portrait of Amy stood nearby, her smile radiant, her eyes bright, immortalized, as if untouched by betrayal. Gloria wept openly, collapsing more than once into Theodore's arms. His face remained a mask, though every word he spoke was hollow, his voice rough from the weight of grief. Raymond delivered the eulogy. His voice trembled at the right moments. His eyes glistened convincingly. Yet every line of his speech was carefully rehearsed, a performance meant to fool the world. Grace leaned into Zeus, who stood silently at her side, his expression unreadable. To outsiders, he was the grieving companion offering support. To those who knew better, he was the shadow behind Amy's fall. "Such tragedy," murmured one guest. "So young," whispered another. "Such a shame for the family." And as dirt rained onto the gleaming casket, none suspected the truth that the woman they mourned was still breathing far from the hills where her name was carved in stone. Back in Seattle, Amy tried to piece herself together. She spent mornings walking the rocky shore, letting the waves numb her thoughts. In the afternoons, she stayed in the cabin, poring over her siblings' business ventures through scraps of information Emmanuel managed to send. The more she read, the more the puzzle sharpened. Stolen funds, falsified accounts, properties funneled through shell companies. They weren't just greedy. They were reckless. And if left unchecked, they would destroy everything their parents built. Yet at night, when exhaustion weighed on her, Daniel was there. Sometimes he cooked simple meals, grilled salmon, fresh bread, and vegetables from a small garden behind the cabin. Other times, he sat with her by the fire, their silences more comforting than words. One evening, as rain lashed against the windows, Amy confessed what she had never dared speak. "When I was little," she said softly, staring into the flames, "I used to think Raymond would protect me. He was older, stronger, but he only ever saw me as a threat. Grace was the clever Tamara, the ambitious, and Gladys the fiery. And me, I was just the baby, the favorite." Her lips quivered. "I never asked for their hate. I never asked for any of this." Daniel reached across the space between them, taking her hand. His grip was warm, firm. "You didn't choose their hate, Amy, but you can choose what you do with it." She turned to him, eyes shining with unshed tears. "And what would you choose, if it were you?" His gaze held hers unflinching. "I'd fight, not for money, not for pride, but for the truth." The words sank deep into her chest. For so long, truth had been buried under the weight of lies, smothered by envy. But perhaps with him by her side, she could bring it to light. A week later, Emmanuel arrived in Seattle. The reunion was a flurry of tears, laughter, and sharp-tongued remarks. "Girl, you look like a ghost," Emmanuel declared, clutching Amy as though she might vanish again. "When I heard the news, I nearly fainted in the middle of a shoot. And you know me, I don't faint. Not with this much contour." Amy laughed through her tears, holding him tightly. She felt a sliver of normalcy for the first time since the nightmare began. Daniel watched quietly from the doorway. His arms folded, his expression unreadable. He wasn't used to intrusions in his solitary world, but seeing Amy smile, he knew this one was welcome. Over dinner, Emmanuel lowered his voice, glancing between them. "Your siblings are reckless. They've started moving money around like wildfire, buying properties in Vegas, hosting parties in New York. They're flaunting it all. But the media, they're watching. They smell a scandal." Amy's jaw tightened. "Good. Let them burn themselves. The more they expose themselves, the easier it will be to bring them down." Emmanuel's eyes glimmered mischievously. "And in the meantime, you have Mr. Fisherman over here to keep you safe." Amy rolled her eyes, but heat rose in her cheeks. Daniel arched a brow but said nothing, though the corner of his mouth twitched in faint amusement. That night, long after Emmanuel had retired to the guest room, Amy stood on the porch. The rain had stopped, leaving the air sharp and clean. The sea stretched endlessly, dark and infinite. Daniel joined her, his presence a steady warmth at her side. "They think I'm dead," she whispered. "My own parents believe I'm gone, and my siblings are dancing on my grave." Daniel's hand brushed against hers, a subtle contact that sent her heart racing. "Then you'll return, not as their victim, as their reckoning." She turned to him, her breath catching. The firelight from inside the cabin spilled across his face, illuminating the strength carved into his features. In that moment, Amy realized the most dangerous truth of all. She wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore. She was falling in love. The cabin had begun to feel less like a refuge and more like a world of its own. Days were marked by the rhythm of the tide, nights by the steady crackle of the fire. For Amy, it was both a blessing and a torment. Safety wrapped in wood and stone, but also the knowledge that outside its walls, her siblings tightened their grip on everything her parents had built. And yet, there was Daniel. The man she had stumbled upon was like fate itself. The man who looked at her not as the heiress buried in false headlines, not as the pawn in a family feud, but simply as a woman. Tonight, the weight of that truth pressed heavier than ever. Emmanuel had returned to Los Angeles the day before, promising to feed her information and keep her name hidden. The cabin was quiet again, leaving only Amy and Daniel and the silence between them. Amy stood at the kitchen counter, attempting to chop vegetables. Her hand trembled slightly, the knife uneven against the cutting board. She was used to assistance, not this kind of domestic task. Daniel watched from the doorway, amusement flickering in his eyes. "You're holding it wrong." She glanced up, arching a brow. "Excuse me?" He stepped forward close enough that she caught the faint scent of salt water and cedar that clung to him. Without asking, he slid his hand over hers, adjusting her grip on the knife. His touch was firm, steady, guiding. Like this, he murmured, his voice low. Amy's breath caught. The knife suddenly felt irrelevant. All she noticed was the warmth of his skin against hers, the way his presence seemed to command the air itself. For a heartbeat too long, she didn't move. Daniel withdrew as if sensing her turmoil. "Try again." She forced herself to focus, slicing the carrot cleanly this time. Triumph sparked in her chest, though it wasn't just from the cut. "See?" he said, his lips twitching. "You're a fast learner." Amy exhaled slowly, her heart still racing. A fast learner, yes, she thought, but not when it comes to resisting you. Later they ate together by the fire, the ocean wind rattling the windows. Daniel spoke little as always, but his silences were no longer barriers. They were invitations, spaces for her to fill, or not as she chose. "Amy said, you still haven't told me why you left your world behind," breaking the quiet. Daniel's gaze lingered on the flames. "Because sometimes wealth becomes a prison. People see fortune and its name, but not the man. Out here, I'm free." Amy studied him. "But aren't you hiding? Just like me?" His eyes lifted to hers, sharp and unflinching. "Maybe. But I choose my exile. You didn't." The words hit her with more force than she expected. For so long, she had felt powerless, cast out by the people who should have protected her. But Daniel reminded her she still had choices. She still had a voice. Her lips curved faintly. "Then together, we can stop hiding." Something flickered in his gaze, an ember small but undeniable. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, the illusion of control began to fracture. Raymond stood at the head of a lavish banquet hall in West Hollywood, shaking hands with investors, his smile wide and false. Cameras flashed, glasses clinked, but beneath the glitter of the evening whispers spread. "Didn't the company's quarterly profits drop?" One businessman murmured. Another replied that Raymond pulled funds from the foundation to cover debts. Draped in emerald silk, Grace leaned against Zeus, her laughter too sharp and forced. Tamara boasted of her latest art collection, though critics had begun to suspect the authenticity of her work. Gladys drank too much, her temper flaring at the slightest provocation. They were unraveling even as they tried to shine. And somewhere in the shadows of the banquet, a journalist took notes, recording every contradiction. Back in Seattle, the storm outside matched the one inside Amy's chest. Rain battered the cabin, lightning flashing across the waves. She sat by the window, hugging her knees, her mind a whirl of grief and fury. Her parents were mourning her as dead. Her siblings were thriving on the illusion of her absence. The empire she was meant to protect was crumbling under their greed. "I feel like I'm suffocating," she whispered when Daniel approached, her voice breaking. "I'm here alive, but the world has buried me, and I can't even call my mother to tell her the truth." Daniel crouched before her, his hand resting gently on her knee. "Amy, you're not powerless. You've been given the most significant advantage. They believe you're gone. That means you can move unseen, strike when they least expect it." His words sparked something inside her, a flicker of fire she thought had been extinguished. She looked at him, her eyes glistening. "And if I fail," he held her gaze, "then I'll be there to catch you." The simplicity of the promise, the steadiness of it undid her. She reached out before stopping herself, her hand brushing against his cheek. His stubble was rough under her fingers. his skin warm. Daniel froze, his breath shallow, his eyes locked on hers. The storm outside howled, but the world felt unbearably still in its fragile silence. Then Daniel leaned closer just enough that she felt the ghost of his breath against her lips. But he didn't kiss her. Not yet. Instead, he whispered, "You should rest. Tomorrow we start planning." And with that, he pulled back, leaving her heart pounding with longing and frustration. Sleep did not come easily that night. Amy tossed beneath the blankets, her mind replaying every glance, every touch. She had faced bullets and betrayal, but nothing frightened her more than the way Daniel Walker made her feel like she wasn't just fighting for justice, but for a future she hadn't dared dream of. The next morning, Daniel spread maps and documents across the table. He said, "I have contacts in New York," pointing to a list of names. "They've been watching your siblings' investments. If we track the money, we'll find proof of their corruption." Amy leaned over the papers, her shoulder brushing his. The contact sent a shiver through her, though she forced her focus to the task at hand. "They'll be expecting reporters," she said, scanning the notes. "But not me. Not the woman they think is dead." Daniel's lips curved faintly. "Exactly." Their eyes met the air between them, charged. For a moment the maps and evidence faded. All Amy saw was the man beside her, the man who had pulled her from the sea, the man who saw her not as a target, but as a survivor. And in that moment, she knew one truth above all. Her fight was no longer just for her inheritance. It was for the chance to build something tangible with him. In Los Angeles, the cracks widened. A leaked article accused Raymond of embezzlement. Social media buzzed with rumors that Tamara's paintings were forged. Grace's relationship with Zeus was splashed across tabloids, raising questions about his shady dealings. Gloria read every headline with growing dread, her heart heavy with the absence of her youngest. "If only Amy were here," she whispered to Theodore. She would never have let it come to this. But Theodore's eyes were distant, unreadable. Deep down, he wondered if perhaps Amy's death had not been an accident at all. Back in Seattle, night fell once more. Amy and Daniel stood on the porch, the stars glimmering above. She turned to him, her voice soft but steady. "Daniel, when this is over, when they're exposed, what then? What happens to us?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then slowly he reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers. Then he said quietly, "We stop running, and maybe we start living." Amy's heart ached at its simplicity. For so long her life had been defined by wealth, power, and betrayal. But with him, the future felt different. Possible. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. The air in New York carried a different kind of electricity. Unlike Los Angeles, where glitz was a mask, Manhattan wore its ambition openly, skyscrapers, stabbing the sky streets pulsing with urgency. For Amy, stepping off the plane felt like stepping into a battlefield, where the rules were sharp and merciless. Beside her, Daniel was silent. He had insisted on accompanying her, his presence like a fortress she hadn't known she needed until now. His gaze swept the terminal, alert, protective, but when his eyes returned to her, they softened. "You don't have to do this alone," he murmured. Amy tilted her chin, a small defiant smile tugging at her lips. "I know, but I need to be the one they see, the one they underestimated." Her siblings believed her dead. That illusion gave her a weapon sharper than any blade, surprise. And tonight at Tamara's much-hyped exhibition at the New York Art Museum, she would wield it. Tamara's name was already beginning to rot under suspicion in Los Angeles. Whispers of plagiarism had trickled through elite circles, but in New York she sought redemption. The gala was her chance to prove herself, Champagne Tower's walls adorned with canvases she claimed, and a crowd of critics, investors, and celebrities ready to be dazzled. Amy intended to shatter it all. That evening, Amy dressed with quiet deliberation. The gown was black silk, sleek, and understated, the kind that whispered elegance without screaming for attention. Her curls framed her face, and her lips carried only a hint of color. She wasn't here to outshine Tamara. She was here to end her. Daniel waited near the window of their hotel suite, his suit a dark shade that sharpened the blue of his eyes. When he turned to see her, his breath seemed to catch. "You look..." He stopped, searching for the right word. Amy's brow arched playfully. Like a ghost back from the dead, he gave a wry smile, like a storm about to break. Their gazes lingered, charged, until Amy forced herself to move. "Let's go." The museum shimmered with light. Guests arrived in sleek cars, greeted by photographers and ushers in crisp black uniforms. Inside, the marble lobby gleamed, its vaulted ceiling echoing with laughter and clinking glasses. Tamara stood at the center of it all, radiant in scarlet, her smile wide as cameras flashed. For a moment, Amy studied her sister from the shadows. She looked every bit the triumphant artist, poised, adored, untouchable. But Amy knew the truth. Every canvas on those walls was a stolen lie. Amy slipped through the crowd, unnoticed, her face partially hidden by a delicate mask, an accessory chosen not just for fashion, but for anonymity. Daniel remained close, his presence a quiet anchor amid the chaos. A young technician waited nervously by the audiovisual console at the far corner. Amy approached, her voice low but firm. "Do you have it?" The man nodded quickly, handing her a flash drive. "Everything's ready the moment you give the signal." Amy slipped the drive into her clutch, her fingers tightening around it. This was more than revenge. This was the truth, sharpened into a blade. The gala reached its crescendo. Critics admired, investors praised, and Tamara basked in it all. Then the lights dimmed, and a spotlight found her. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice ringing with practiced confidence, "thank you for joining me tonight. Each of these works represents not just my vision, but my soul. I pour myself into every brushstroke, every color, every detail." Applause followed, warm and reverent. Amy's heart pounded. "Now." She signaled the technician. The screens lining the walls flickered. For a moment, confusion rippled through the crowd. Then images appeared. Sketches, photographs, videos. Not Tamara's hand, but another's. The true artist. Gasps spread like wildfire. Side by side, the comparisons were undeniable. Tamara's canvases were nothing more than copies, stolen strokes, masquerading as genius. "No." Tamara stammered, her smile faltering. This is a mistake." The footage continued. The real artist appeared on screen, speaking with calm authority, presenting dates, drafts, and proof of theft. The crowd erupted, some murmuring in shock, others snapping photographs, eager for scandal. Amy stepped forward, pulling off her mask. Gasps rippled again, sharper this time. The dead had returned. "Hello, Tamara," Amy said, her voice steady, carrying through the hall. "Did you miss me?" Tamara's face drained of color. You're supposed to be gone." Amy's smile was ice. "You should know by now, sister. I don't disappear so easily." The gala dissolved into chaos. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing like lightning. Investors muttered furiously, critics scribbled notes, and Tamara trembled under the weight of exposure. Amy didn't stay for the aftermath. She walked out with Daniel at her side, her head held high, her heart thrumming with adrenaline. Outside, the cool night wrapped around her like armor. She had struck her first blow, and it had landed clean. But as she reached the waiting car, her body finally trembled. Daniel caught her hand, steadying her. "You did it," he said softly. Amy met his gaze, her voice breaking. I've started a war. His grip tightened. Then I'll fight it with you. Back at the hotel, the adrenaline still surged through her veins. Amy paced the suite, unable to sit still, replaying the night repeatedly. She said they'll come after me harder now, her voice sharp. Raymond, Grace, Gladys. They won't let this go. And Tamara. She laughed bitterly. Tamara will never forgive me. Daniel watched from the armchair, his posture calm, his eyes following her. You didn't do this for their forgiveness. You did it for the truth. She stopped, turning toward him. And what if the truth destroys me too? He rose, crossing the room, until he stood inches from her. His presence towered not in intimidation, but in certainty. Then, let it destroy who you were, he said, so you can become who you're meant to be. Amy's breath caught. His words stripped her bare, leaving no defenses. Her pulse raced as his hand lifted, brushing against her cheek. The world slowed, quieted. The storm of fear, grief, and rage receded, leaving only this, the man who saw her not as prey, not as pawn, but as a woman strong, alive, desired. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. And when his lips finally found hers, it was not the cautious, almost kiss of nights before. It was fire, fierce and undeniable. The kiss deepened, urgent, as though both knew the fragility of time, as though tomorrow could rip them apart. When they broke apart, breathless, Amy whispered, "You scare me." Daniel's lips curved faintly. Good, because you scare me too. While Amy tasted victory in New York, the Marasigan estate in Beverly Hills boiled with fury. Raymond threw a glass against the wall, shards scattering across the marble. She's alive. She humiliated Tamara in front of the whole city. Grace paced furiously, her nails digging crescents into her palms. We should have finished her when we had the chance, Zeus swore. Zeus is a fool, Raymond snapped. This isn't over. If Amy wants a war, she'll get one. Gladys, silent until now, finally spoke, her voice low and venomous. Then we cut deeper. Not just her. Her allies. Anyone who stands with her. The siblings exchanged dark looks, their bond forged not by love, but mutual hatred. And in the shadows, Zeus lit a cigarette, his smirk curling. Let her run. Let her fight. In the end, she'll crawl right back into my hands. Back in the hotel's quiet, Amy lay awake beside Daniel, her head resting against his chest. The city hummed outside, alive with gossip, scandal, and whispers of her return. But here, in the warmth of his embrace, she allowed herself a fleeting moment of peace. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was living. And she knew with chilling certainty that her war had only just begun. The Marasigan estate in Beverly Hills had never felt like home. It was a fortress draped in glass and marble, a place where chandeliers glittered brighter than affection, where silence held more weight than laughter. Now standing at its gates once more, Amy's chest tightened. She was not the girl who had fled weeks ago, broken and bleeding. She was no ghost. Tonight she returned not as prey, but as reckoning. Beside her, Daniel adjusted the cuff of his jacket, his presence solid as stone. You're trembling, he said softly. I'm not afraid. Amy whispered, though her voice betrayed the storm inside. Daniel's eyes searched hers. Fear doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Her lips curved faintly. Then I'm both. The gates opened with a groan, and together they stepped into the lion's den. Inside, the estate buzzed with life. Guests filled the grand hall, their laughter echoing off marble columns. Chandeliers spilled golden light over gowns and tuxedos, a celebration masquerading as elegance. At the center of it all stood Raymond, Tamara, Grace, and Gladys. Their smiles gleamed for the crowd, but their eyes, sharp cold, betrayed unease. News of New York had spread too quickly. Tamara's disgrace still clung to her like smoke, and then the room fell silent. Gasps rippled, heads turned. The crowd parted like water. Amy had entered, alive. Draped in midnight velvet, her curls cascading down her shoulders, she looked every bit the heiress they had tried to bury. Tamara's glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the floor. Grace paled. Raymond stiffened, his jaw tight. Gladys was the first to find her voice. "You," she hissed. "Impossible." Amy's smile was sharp as glass. "Good evening, sisters." "Brother." Whispers swirled like wildfire. "She's alive. Didn't she die in that explosion? What is happening?" Gloria staggered from across the room, her hands trembling as she pressed them to her mouth. Tears blurred her vision. "Amy, is it truly you?" Amy's chest ached, but she nodded. "I'm here, Mama." Gloria broke, rushing forward, enveloping her daughter in desperate arms. "I thought I lost you. I buried you in my heart." Her sobs trembled against Amy's shoulder. Behind them, Theodore's face was stone, but his eyes, distant, searching, betrayed emotion. Daniel stood nearby, silent and watchful, his presence shielded and witnessed. The reunion was short-lived. Raymond stepped forward, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "This is a trick," he spat. "A performance. She wants to ruin us." Amy turned to him, her gaze cold. "I don't need tricks, Raymond. Your ruin writes itself." Tamara's lip trembled. "You humiliated me in New York. You've destroyed everything." "No," Amy replied evenly. "You destroyed yourself the moment you stole another artist's work. I merely showed the world the truth." Grace's nails dug into her palms. "You don't belong here anymore. You should have stayed dead." Amy stepped closer, her voice low but carrying. "Perhaps, but fate had other plans." Later, in the hushed corners of the estate, Amy wandered the hallways she had once known so well. Portraits of ancestors stared down at her, silent witnesses to betrayal and bloodlines. Daniel followed quietly, his hand brushing hers when no one was watching. The simple contact steadied her, anchoring her in a sea of ghosts. "Are you all right?" he asked. Amy exhaled slowly. "Being here, it feels like drowning. But I have to do this." His gaze softened. "You don't have to do it alone." She turned to him, then her voice raw. "Why are you still here, Daniel? You've seen the danger. You've seen what my family is capable of." His answer was simple, because leaving you would be the greater danger. Her heart lurched, and for a moment she allowed herself to lean into him, resting her forehead against his chest. His arms came around her instinctively, pulling her close. In his embrace, the mansion's walls seemed less suffocating. For the first time all evening, she could breathe. Meanwhile, the siblings gathered in Raymond's study, their voices sharp in fury. "She's alive!" Raymond seethed, pacing like a caged predator, alive and stronger than ever. "She's turning the public against us." Tamara's eyes were wild. "We can't let her keep doing this. Tonight was just the beginning." Gladys slammed her hand against the desk. "Then we end it. Permanently." Grace's lips curved into a cold smile. "Then let's remind Amy what it means to challenge us." The four exchanged glances, their pact sealed not by love but venom. Amy rejoined the guests in the ballroom, Daniel never far from her side. Whispers still followed her, some in awe, others in suspicion. But she held her head high, her arm brushing against Daniel's as if drawing strength from his nearness. Gloria clung to her daughter, refusing to let go. "Stay here," she pleaded. Stay home where it's safe." Amy's heart ached at the desperation in her mother's voice. "Mama, this house is no longer safe for me. You know that." Tears glistened in Gloria's eyes, but she said nothing. She knew it was true. Later that night, as the estate's lights dimmed and the guests trickled out, Amy stood alone on the balcony overlooking the city. Los Angeles glittered below beautiful and treacherous. Daniel joined her quietly, a glass of wine in his hand. "They'll come after you harder now," he said. Amy nodded, her voice calm. "Let them. I'm ready." He studied her, the city lights painting his face in shades of silver. "I don't doubt that. But what scares me is not what they'll do to you. It's what they'll do to the people you love." Her chest tightened, "Which means you." His silence was answer enough. Amy reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. The gesture was small, but it was an unspoken vow. "I won't lose you," she whispered. Daniel turned to her, his gaze intense, unflinching. "And I won't let them take you." Their eyes locked, the world narrowing to just the two of them. And in the fragile stillness, Amy leaned in, pressing her lips to his. This kiss was different from the one in New York. Not fire, not desperation, but a promise, steady, unyielding, inevitable. When they parted, her heart no longer trembled. It burned. In the shadows of the estate, unseen by both, Zeus watched. His cigarette glowed in the dark, the smoke curling like a serpent. His smirk was cold, his voice a whisper meant only for himself. "Run, little heiress. Run to your lover. But in the end, you'll crawl back to me." The city never truly slept. But that night, Los Angeles felt heavier, thick with secrets, humming with threats that lingered in the dark. Amy awoke in the guest suite of the Marasigan estate, with a start, her chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. For a moment, she didn't know what had dragged her from sleep, until she noticed the silence. Too silent. No distant hum of cars, no shuffle of servants in the hall, not even the faint whistle of wind through the trees. Her pulse quickened. Then a knock. 3 short raps against the door. Amy Daniels' voice was low but steady. Relief spread through her chest. She opened the door, and there he stood, shirt slightly unbuttoned, jaw tense, eyes alert. "What is it?" she whispered. "I don't like the quiet," he said. "Stay close." Minutes later, they were moving through the estate's back corridors, Daniel guiding her with purposeful steps. The chandeliers above them cast fractured light across the marble floor. Each echo of their footsteps sounded too loud, too exposed. Amy's nerves tightened with every shadow. "Do you think—" "Yes," Daniel interrupted softly. "They'll try something tonight." She swallowed hard. "Here. In their own house." His gaze flicked to her, sharp and unyielding. "For people like them, loyalty to blood means nothing. Only power matters." They reached the side garden where the hedges loomed like sentinels under the moonlight. The air smelled of jasmine, sweet yet suffocating. Then movement. Amy caught it from the corner of her eye, a figure slipping through the shadows. Another. Then another. Her heart lurched. Daniel reacted instantly, pulling her against the wall, his body shielding hers. "Stay behind me," he murmured, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. The intruders stepped into the moonlight, masked men in dark clothing, their intent unmistakable. Amy's breath hitched. Raymond. Grace. They sent them. The first lunged. Daniel moved precisely, his fist connecting in a blur, sending the man sprawling. Another swung a blade, but Daniel deflected, grabbing the attacker's wrist and twisting until the knife clattered to the ground. Amy pressed back against the wall, adrenaline surging, terror clawing her throat. Yet even through fear, her eyes locked on him, on the way he fought, not with recklessness, but with controlled ferocity, every movement calculated to protect her. One of the men broke past him, charging straight for her. Amy froze until instinct took over. She snatched the fallen knife, thrusting it forward. The blade nicked the attacker's arm just enough to send him reeling. Daniel's arm wrapped around her, pulling her back to safety. "Good," he whispered fiercely. "Don't hesitate. You fight to live." The skirmish ended as quickly as it began. Two men fled into the night, dragging the injured with them. The garden fell silent once more, broken only by the ragged sound of Amy's breathing. Her hands shook, the knife slipping from her grasp. She looked at Daniel, chest heaving. "They won't stop. They'll keep coming until I'm gone." Daniel reached for her, cupping her face between his hands. His thumb brushed a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "Then let them come," he said softly. "They'll have to go through me first." The tenderness in his voice cracked something inside her. In that moment, he wasn't just her protector. He was her anchor, her impossible constant in a storm designed to break her. Before she could think, before fear could pull her back, Amy rose onto her toes and kissed him. It wasn't a cautious kiss this time. It was fire, born of danger, fueled by desperation, sharpened by the taste of near death. Daniel pulled her closer, his hands gripping her waist, his mouth answering hers with equal hunger. Time vanished, the night dissolving into the heat of their bodies pressed together, the rush of shared breath, the rawness of survival, bleeding into something more profound. When they finally pulled apart, foreheads pressed together, Amy whispered, "You're the only thing that feels real." His answer was a vow. "Then hold on to me, no matter what comes." By dawn, the estate buzzed with rumors. Servants whispered of strange night noises, shadows slipping through the garden. But no one spoke aloud what they suspected, that the Marasigan heirs had turned their home into a battlefield. Amy confronted them at breakfast. Raymond sat at the head of the table, sipping his coffee with practiced calm. Grace toyed with a diamond bracelet. Tamara avoided her gaze, pale and tight-lipped. Gladys leaned back in her chair, her smirk thin and cruel. "You sent men to kill me," Amy said, her voice steady, though her hands trembled at her sides. Raymond looked up lazily. "That's a bold accusation." Amy slammed her hand against the table, the echo sharp. "Don't play games. I saw their faces. I know whose orders they follow." Grace's laugh was brittle. "You've always been dramatic. Perhaps the shadows last night were only your imagination." Daniel, standing behind Amy, spoke for the first time. His voice was calm but edged with steel. "Imaginations don't bleed when you cut them." The room went still. Gladys's smile faltered. Tamara's fork clattered against her plate. Amy leaned forward, her eyes burning. "You tried to bury me once. You failed. Do it again, and I'll bury you instead, with evidence, with truth, with every secret you've tried to hide." The siblings exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, Amy saw fear flicker in Raymond's eyes. That afternoon, Amy and Daniel left the estate, retreating to a safe house Daniel had arranged outside the city. The small modern apartment overlooked the Pacific, a far cry from the opulence of Beverly Hills. For Amy, it was liberation. There were no chandeliers, marble halls, or whispers clinging to every wall. Here it was only them, the woman rising from ashes, the man who refused to let her fall. As twilight bled across the horizon, Amy stood on the balcony, arms folded against the sea breeze. Daniel joined her, his hand brushing hers. "You could walk away," he murmured. "Disappear for good. Live quietly. No more war." Amy turned to him, her eyes fierce. "And let them win. Let them poison everything my parents built. No, I won't." He studied her, then nodded. Then I'll be at your side. Always. The words were simple, but how he said them, quiet, absolute, felt like a binding vow. Amy's chest ached, but it wasn't fear this time. It was something far more dangerous. Love. Meanwhile, in the shadows of Los Angeles, Raymond and Grace plotted. She's gaining power, Grace hissed, pacing the study. New York humiliated Tamara. Now she dares to stand against us in our home. If we don't act, we'll lose everything. Raymond's eyes narrowed. Then we don't just strike at her, we strike at him. Daniel Walker. Grace frowned. The hotel empire. Raymond's lips curved in a cold smile. Exactly. She clings to him, protects him, loves him. If we take him, we take her. Zeus leaned against the wall, cigarette glowing. Leave him to me. She'll come running back when she realizes she can't save him. Raymond's gaze hardened. See that you don't fail again. Back in the safe house, Amy drifted to sleep in Daniel's arms, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, soothing her restless thoughts. She allowed herself to dream for the first time in weeks, not of fear or betrayal, but of possibility. But outside, unseen in the shadows, eyes watched the apartment. The war was far from over. It was only the beginning. The ocean outside the safe house sang softly that night, a lullaby of waves colliding with rocks. Inside, Amy leaned against Daniel on the small balcony, her cheek resting on his shoulder. His warmth wrapped around her, like a promise, steadying her in a world that kept trying to break her. I almost forgot what peace feels like. She murmured, her voice barely louder than the tide. Daniel's arm tightened around her. Peace isn't forgetting the war, Amy. It's knowing you're not fighting it alone. Her heart tugged painfully at the truth of his words. For the first time, she wanted more than just revenge. She wanted a future. A life not built on fear or wealth, but on this. The steady pulse of his heartbeat. The quiet strength in his gaze. The love that lingered unsaid between them. But the night, like her family, had no intention of granting her peace. It began with the sound of shattering glass. Amy bolted upright, her breath caught in her throat. Daniel was already moving, pulling her behind him as footsteps thundered through the hallway. Stay here, he ordered, his voice sharp. Daniel, no arguments, Amy. His eyes locked on hers, fierce and unyielding. I'll come back for you. Before she could protest, he disappeared into the shadows of the apartment. The world tilted. Fear coiled in her chest, hot and suffocating. She pressed herself against the wall, listening shouts, the heavy thud of fists, the scrape of furniture. Then, silence. Too much silence. Her pulse roared in her ears. She rushed forward, ignoring his command, only to find the living room, wrecked glass glittering across the floor, the door hanging open. And Daniel gone. Her breath fractured. The space reeked of intrusion, of loss. On the floor lay a single black glove, and beside it a message scrawled in red ink on the wall. Come alone, or you'll bury him too. Amy's knees weakened. The words blurred before her eyes. They had taken him. Morning light brought no relief. Amy sat at the small table, fists clenched around the note she had found. Every nerve in her body screamed, every thought collided with the next. Rage, fear, despair, all tangled into one suffocating knot. She wanted to collapse, to scream until her voice broke. But beneath the storm was something sharper, steadier determination. Her siblings had stolen too much already. She would not let them steal Daniel. Not him. Never him. She called Emmanuel first. His gasp crackled through the line. They what? Oh, honey, no. Not Daniel. His voice dropped to a whisper, sharp with fear. This isn't just about you anymore. They know he's your heart. Amy pressed her fingers to her temple, closing her eyes. Exactly. That's why I have to get him back. Alone. Alone? Are you insane? Emmanuel hissed. They'll use him as bait. They'll destroy you both. Her voice broke, but her resolve didn't. If I don't go, he dies. If I do go, maybe I still have a chance. There was silence then. Emmanuel exhaled shakily. Then promise me something. Promise me you won't let love close your eyes to strategy. Use your mind, not just your heart. Amy clutched the phone tighter. I'll use both. That's the only way I win. By dusk, she was ready. She traded her velvet gowns for black jeans, a leather jacket and boots, armor of a different kind. Her curls were tied back, her eyes sharpened with resolve. Every step toward the warehouse address in the note felt like walking into her grave. But fear no longer controlled her. Love did. Inside the warehouse, shadows sprawled across the cracked concrete floor. A single light bulb swung from the ceiling, illuminating Daniel tied to a chair, his face bruised but unbroken. Her chest seized at the sight. Relief and terror collided all at once. Daniel. His head snapped up, eyes blazing with both fury and warning. Amy, don't! A voice cut through the air. Well, well. Raymond stepped from the shadows, his suit impeccable, his smirk venomous. The ghost returns. Grace appeared at his side, her eyes glinting. Did you really think we wouldn't strike back, Amy? You've humiliated us. You've stolen everything. Tamara lingered in the corner, pale and silent, while Gladys leaned casually against a crate, arms crossed. Amy's fists curled. Let him go. This is between us. Raymond's laugh was low, cruel. Oh, but that's where you're wrong. Everything is about him now. He's the weakness you swore you didn't have. Her pulse thundered. They were right. Daniel was her weakness, but he was also her strength. She stepped forward, her voice sharp. You think love makes me weak? You're wrong. It makes me unstoppable, Grace sneered. Big words. But will they save him? Raymond drew a gun from his jacket, the barrel gleaming under the swinging light. He aimed it directly at Daniel. Amy's blood turned to ice. Don't you dare! Then kneel, Raymond ordered, his voice cold. Kneel, and maybe I'll let him live. Her breath fractured fury, warring with terror. Daniel shook his head violently. Don't, Amy. Don't you give them the satisfaction. Her eyes burned as she stared at him. Every instinct screamed to protect him, to trade her pride for his life. But then she saw the faith in his eyes, the unspoken vow that she was stronger than this moment. No, she whispered, straightening her spine. I won't kneel. Not to you. Not ever again. The tension snapped like glass. Amy lunged in the chaos that followed, grabbing the hanging light bulb's cord and yanking it down. The room plunged into shadows. Shouts erupted, footsteps scrambling. Her hand found Daniel's ropes, fumbling against the knots. Hold still, she whispered, breath ragged. The ropes gave way. Daniel surged to his feet, pulling her against him. Go. They ran, weaving through crates as gunfire cracked against steel. Her pulse roared, but Daniel's hand gripped hers like iron, anchoring her through the storm. They burst through a side door into the night air, lungs burning. Tires screeched. Emmanuel's car waited at the curb, engine running. Get in! He shouted, eyes wide. They dove into the back seat as bullets ricocheted against metal. The car tore down the street, the warehouse shrinking behind them. Only when the city lights blurred around them did Amy finally collapse against Daniel's sobs, shaking her chest. I thought I lost you. He pulled her close, his lips brushing her hair. You never will. Not as long as I'm breathing. Later, in the safety of another hideout, Amy traced the bruise on Daniel's jaw with trembling fingers. I can't let them use you against me again. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Then stop fighting for revenge alone. Let us fight for each other. Her breath hitched. And if that love destroys us? His gaze was steady, unwavering. Then let it. I'd rather burn with you than live without you. Tears stung her eyes, but they were born of something more profound than fear this time. It was love, terrifying, undeniable, absolute. She leaned forward, kissing him with all the desperation of survival and the tenderness of devotion. And in that kiss, she knew no matter what her siblings planned next, they could no longer break her. Because love had made her unstoppable. Meanwhile, in the shadows of Los Angeles, Raymond's fury erupted. She slipped away again. He roared, smashing a glass against the wall. Grace's face twisted with venom. Then we strike harder. If she wants a war, we'll give her one. Zeus stepped forward, his smirk curling. Next time, we don't just take him. We take everything she loves. And in that vow, the war escalated into something darker than Amy had ever faced. The ballroom glittered beneath 1,000 lights, the chandeliers reflecting off crystal glasses and silk gowns. Tonight, the Marasigan estate had opened its doors wider than ever, welcoming investors, politicians, journalists, an audience hungry for glamour, unaware they were about to witness a storm. Amy stood at the edge of the grand staircase, her breath calm, her posture unyielding. She had chosen a gown of deep sapphire blue, bold against the sea of black and white. Every step she had taken to reach this moment burned inside her chest. Betrayal, survival, war, and now the end. Daniel was beside her, dressed in a dark suit that sharpened the lines of his broad shoulders. His hand brushed hers discreetly, reminding her she wasn't facing this alone. "Are you ready?" he murmured. Amy's lips curved faintly. "I've been ready since the night they tried to kill me." When she descended the staircase, the crowd hushed. Whispers rippled like wildfire. "She's alive. But wasn't she? How is this possible?" At the hall's center, Raymond froze mid-conversation, his glass of whiskey suspended in the air. Grace's face drained of color. Tamara trembled, and Gladys's smirk faltered. And then Gloria gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Amy!" Theodore's eyes widened, his stoic mask cracking for the first time. "My daughter." Amy's heart ached at the sound of his voice, but she forced herself to stay steady. Tonight wasn't about reconciliation. Tonight was about truth. The lights dimmed. A projector flared to life behind her, filling the ballroom wall with images, documents, videos, evidence. Amy's voice carried through the room, clear, unwavering. "Months ago, the world was told I had died, that I was lost in an accident, but that was a lie. My own siblings planned my death with Zeus as their accomplice. Why? Because our parents trusted me with the empire they could never protect." Gasps spread. Journalists fumbled for their pens. On-screen images of Tamara's stolen art appeared, followed by proof of Raymond's embezzlement, Grace's illicit deals, and Gladys's shell companies. Every secret laid bare, every betrayal illuminated under harsh light. "This is who they are," Amy continued. "Not leaders, not heirs. Criminals who would rather destroy their family than see it thrive. They tried to kill me. They poisoned our mother. They squandered everything our parents built. And tonight the truth belongs not just to me, but to all of you." The room erupted, outrage, disbelief, scandal. Raymond surged forward, his face twisted in fury. "Lies. All of it." Amy's gaze burned. "If they are lies, why are you shaking?" Grace's voice broke. "Mama, don't believe her. She's twisting everything." But Gloria was weeping, clutching her chest. Theodore stepped forward, his voice thunderous. Enough. I have ignored the rot for too long. But tonight I see it clearly. You have betrayed this family. The four siblings faltered, trapped in the glare of judgment. Zeus made one final move. He drew a gun from the corner of the hall, aiming straight at Amy. Screams tore through the crowd. Guests scrambled, glasses shattered. But Daniel was faster. He stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body. Amy cried, her blood freezing. Zeus's finger twitched on the trigger. A shot rang out. Not his. Security swarmed, pinning Zeus to the ground, the gun skittering across marble. Theodore's men had acted first, pulling him away in chains. Amy collapsed against Daniel, her hands clutching his jacket, her breath ragged. I thought. He tilted her face up, his eyes burning with fierce calm. I told you. As long as I'm breathing, you won't lose me. Tears blurred her vision, but she nodded. By night's end, the estate no longer glittered with glamour. Police lights flashed outside, casting red and blue shadows across marble walls. Raymond, Grace, and Tamara were led away in handcuffs, their fury drowned beneath scandal. Gladys slipped free on a technicality, but her eyes, dark, venomous, promised that the war wasn't over. Gloria clung to Amy, sobbing apologies while Theodore's shoulders sagged with shame. You were the only one who stood tall, he murmured to her. The only one worthy. Amy glanced at Daniel, who stood quietly beside her. Not the only one. I didn't survive alone. Weeks later, peace returned in fragments. The empire began to heal under new management, with Amy's guidance balancing her parents' weary hands. The newspapers called her the heiress who rose from the ashes. But Amy no longer cared about titles or headlines. What mattered was this waking in Daniel's arms, their laughter spilling through mornings, their whispered plans about futures that didn't involve blood or betrayal. Once a dangerous weakness, love had become her most potent weapon, her sweetest freedom. Daniel knelt by the ocean's edge on a quiet Sunday, the waves curling against the sand. He held a small velvet box, his voice uncharacteristically unsteady. Amy Marasigan, he said, meeting her gaze. You fought for truth, for justice, for love. Now, let me fight for you and us for the rest of our lives. Will you marry me? Tears spilled down her cheeks, her heart bruised by war, but unbroken sword. Yes, she whispered 1,000 times, yes. The kiss followed was not of desperation or survival, but of triumph, a promise, a beginning. Years later, laughter filled their seaside home. Children's voices echoed through sunlit halls, while Daniel and Amy sat hand in hand watching the waves that had once carried her into his life. The world remembered her as the heiress who defied death and betrayal. But Amy only remembered herself as a woman who chose love and won. Amy's journey is a reminder that no betrayal, no darkness can silence truth or love. And sometimes the fiercest battles are fought not in boardrooms or ballrooms, but in the heart. If this story moved, you don't let it end here. Please share it. Talk about it. Imagine the following chapters of Amy and Daniel's life, or create your love, courage, and survival stories. Because somewhere out there, someone is waiting for a tale like this to give them hope.